For 10 years, Adrian Cross believed he was the only reason his marriage survived. So when he placed divorce papers in front of his wife, Claire Whitmore, and told her to leave the home they shared, he expected panic and desperation. He thought he was finally removing the quiet woman who no longer fit his ambitious world. He never knew Claire had just inherited control of a billion-dollar family empire. The wife he dismissed as powerless was about to become the one person who could change everything. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Before Adrian destroyed the marriage he thought was holding him back, he never realized Claire had already been protecting a secret that could change everything. Claire Whitmore sat quietly at the dining table, looking at the papers Adrian had placed in front of her. The room was the same room where they had celebrated anniversaries, shared difficult conversations, and once believed they were building a life together. But that night, it felt unfamiliar. The man sitting across from her no longer looked like the person she had married. Adrian Cross had built a successful career in corporate management. Over the past few years, he had moved higher into executive circles, surrounded himself with people who measured success by influence, appearances, and connections. And somewhere along the way, he started believing Claire no longer belonged beside him. "You know this is the right decision," Adrian said calmly. Claire looked at him but said nothing. He mistook her silence for weakness. That was the mistake he had been making for years. To Adrian, Claire was the wife who stayed home, avoided expensive events, and never tried to impress anyone. She wore simple clothes, drove an ordinary car, and rarely talked about money. He saw that as a lack of ambition. He never understood that Claire had chosen that life deliberately. Long before Adrian became obsessed with status, Claire had learned something about wealth that most people never understood. Money could change how people treated you. It could make strangers respect you, while knowing nothing about who you really were. That was exactly why she had kept her family history private. Claire had grown up knowing that the Whitmore name carried weight in certain circles. But after years of watching people become interested only when they discovered power and money, she wanted something different. She wanted to know whether someone could love Claire Whitmore, not a family name or a bank account. Adrian had once convinced her that he could, but success slowly changed him. At first, it was small things. He began caring more about who attended business dinners than how Claire felt after difficult days. He started criticizing the way she dressed, the way she spoke at social events, and the fact that she never tried to build a public image beside him. "You don't understand the world I'm trying to enter," he had told her more than once. Claire understood more than he knew. She simply refused to become someone she was not. Then Victoria Lane entered Adrian's life. Victoria worked in the same professional circles as Adrian. She was confident, polished, and comfortable around wealthy executives. She represented everything Adrian believed he needed to become. Around Victoria, Adrian felt admired. Around Claire, he felt challenged. The difference was that Victoria saw the version of Adrian he wanted people to see. Claire saw the person underneath, and Adrian began choosing the first one. The signs had been there for months. Late meetings became weekend events. Private conversations became hidden messages. Excuses became easier than honesty. Claire noticed. She just did not react the way Adrian expected, because Claire was dealing with something much bigger than an unhappy marriage. Several weeks earlier, after the death of her uncle, she had received a confidential message from Peterson, Harrison & Cole, a law firm that had represented the Whitmore family for decades. The message was brief. They needed to discuss the finalization of the Whitmore Legacy Trust. Claire had known the conversation was coming. She also knew it would change her life. The trust was connected to assets her family had protected for generations. But she had not told Adrian, not because she wanted to manipulate him, because she wanted to understand one final truth. Would Adrian stay if he believed she had nothing? Now, sitting across from him, she had her answer. Adrian leaned back in his chair. "I've already spoken with my attorney," he said. "This will be easier if we both accept that things have changed." Claire looked down at the divorce papers. A part of her wanted to ask him if he truly believed she had contributed nothing to their life together. She wanted to ask if 10 years meant so little, but she already knew the answer. Adrian had spent years measuring value by what people could display. Claire had spent years understanding that real value was often invisible. "I'll sign," she finally said. Adrian blinked. He had expected resistance. He had expected tears. He had expected her to prove that leaving her would be difficult. Instead, Claire picked up the pen and signed the papers with steady hands. For the first time that evening, Adrian looked uncertain. "You're not going to say anything?" Claire placed the pen down. "There isn't anything left to say." Her calmness bothered him more than anger would have. He thought he was walking away from a wife who had no power, no influence, and no future without him. He had no idea that the woman sitting across from him had just become connected to an empire, worth more than everything he had spent his life chasing. After Adrian left the room to make a phone call, Claire's phone quietly vibrated on the table. A new message appeared. It was from the family attorney. The final documents were ready. The transfer of control could now begin. Claire stared at the message for several seconds. Then she locked the screen. Not because she was afraid, because she knew the truth was coming. And Adrian was about to learn that the woman he thought he was leaving behind had never been powerless at all. The message from Peterson, Harrison, and Cole remained on Claire Whitmore's phone for several minutes after Adrian walked away. She did not open the attached documents. Not yet. She knew what was inside. For years, the Whitmore family name had been something she carefully kept in the background. It was not a secret built on deception. It was a boundary she had created to protect the one thing she believed money could never guarantee: a genuine relationship. Claire had seen what happened when people discovered wealth before they discovered the person behind it. Conversations changed. Smiles became calculated. Kindness became a transaction. When she met Adrian, he had no idea about the Whitmore legacy. At the time, that had been one of the reasons she trusted him. He treated her like an ordinary woman. Or at least, she thought he did. Over the years, Claire slowly realized Adrian had loved the version of her that fit his life at the time. He loved the supportive wife who listened to his problems, encouraged his career, and never demanded attention. But when his ambitions grew, his definition of value changed. Claire had watched it happen quietly. The man who once cared about simple dinners and quiet weekends began measuring every interaction by opportunity. He started choosing business events over personal moments. He began comparing their lifestyle to those of other executives, and eventually, he started comparing Claire. Not to another person, to an image. The wives of Adrian's colleagues wore designer clothing, attended exclusive events, and built carefully managed public identities. Claire never wanted that life. She preferred privacy. Adrian saw that as weakness. "She doesn't understand the world I'm entering," he had told one of his colleagues months earlier. Claire had overheard that conversation. She never confronted him. Not because she had nothing to say, because she already understood something important. A person who needed an audience to feel successful was not someone who could be convinced by an explanation. The following morning, Adrian arrived at his office, expecting to feel relieved. Instead, he felt strangely unsettled. The divorce had gone easier than expected. Too easily. He had imagined Claire fighting. He had imagined her asking questions, demanding answers, or trying to save the marriage. Instead, she had simply signed the papers and accepted the end. That bothered him more than anger would have. Victoria Lane noticed immediately. They were sitting in a private corner of an expensive restaurant, discussing their plans for the future. Victoria was already talking about new apartments, social events, and the kind of lifestyle they would have once Adrian was fully free. "You seem distracted," she said. Adrian forced a smile. "I'm just tired." Victoria studied him for a moment. "Are you feeling guilty?" The question irritated him. "No," he answered too quickly. Victoria smiled slightly. "Good. Because you made the right choice." Adrian looked at her. She continued. "Claire was holding you back, Adrian. You know that. You were becoming someone important, and she was comfortable staying invisible." Those words matched the thoughts he had repeated to himself for months. That was why they felt comforting. He wanted to believe leaving Claire was an act of ambition, not betrayal. Meanwhile, Claire began taking the first steps into a world she had spent years avoiding. That afternoon, she entered the offices of Peterson, Harrison, and Cole. The receptionist immediately stood when she saw her name on the appointment schedule. "Ms. Whitmore, they're ready for you." Claire noticed the reaction. It was subtle, professional, but different. The people in the office knew who she was. They were not treating her differently because of appearance or reputation. They were responding to a responsibility they had carried for years. Inside the conference room, Robert Harrison placed several folders in front of her. "Your family's trust structure was designed carefully," he explained. "The transition was delayed because your uncle wanted the process completed properly. There were several corporate obligations that needed verification before control could officially transfer." Claire nodded. She appreciated that no one was rushing her. No one was telling her to celebrate. They were treating the inheritance as what it truly was, a responsibility. "Once the transfer is finalized," Robert continued, "your position within Whitmore Holdings will become active." Claire looked down at the documents. For years, she had been just Claire to Adrian, the quiet wife, the woman who stayed away from attention, the woman who did not need expensive clothes or public recognition to feel secure. Now she was being asked to step into a role she never expected to hold. "I don't want to become someone who only uses power when she is hurt," Claire said quietly. Robert studied her carefully. "That is exactly why your uncle trusted you." Claire looked out the window. She thought about Adrian, placing the divorce papers in front of her. She thought about how easily he had dismissed everything they built. She thought about Victoria's confidence when she believed she had already won. But Claire also thought about something else. She did not want revenge. She wanted control over her own life again. Before leaving the office, Claire received another document from the legal team. It contained preliminary information about Whitmore Holdings' current operations. She expected financial reports. Instead, one name caught her attention: Cross Meridian Solutions, Adrian's company. Claire stared at the page. The connection was not obvious, but it was there. For years, Adrian had spoken about his career as if he built everything alone. He had talked about his business relationships, his network, and his ability to create opportunities. But he never knew some of those opportunities existed because of agreements connected to the Whitmore family. Claire closed the folder. She needed more information, not assumptions, not emotions, facts. That evening, Adrian returned home believing he had finally removed the obstacle between himself and the future he wanted. He opened a bottle of champagne with Victoria. He looked around the apartment and imagined a different life, a more impressive life, a more successful life, a life where nobody would ever question whether he belonged among powerful people. He had no idea that the woman he had just divorced was sitting across town, reviewing the very business network he depended on. And the next morning, Adrian would receive a message from his own attorney about a detail in the divorce process that he never expected. A detail connected to Claire's family name. Claire Whitmore spent the next few days doing something she had not done in years. She stopped explaining herself. After the divorce papers were signed, Adrian seemed to expect some kind of emotional reaction. A phone call, a message, a request for another conversation. None came. Claire knew silence would bother him more than anger. For years, Adrian had been comfortable when he could predict her response. He knew she would listen. He knew she would forgive. He knew she would try to protect their relationship even when he was the one creating the distance between them. But that version of Claire was gone. She was not becoming cold. She was becoming clear. At the Whitmore family offices, Claire continued meeting with the legal and financial teams responsible for the transition of the family trust. She still did not announce anything publicly. She still did not walk into rooms demanding recognition. She asked questions. She reviewed documents. She listened. That was what surprised many people around her. They expected someone inheriting control of a major company to immediately make bold moves. Instead, Claire spent hours studying reports, understanding employees' concerns, and learning where the company had changed since her family stepped away from daily operations. She wanted to understand what she was responsible for before she used her authority. That was something Adrian never understood about her. He confused quietness with weakness. But Claire had always been paying attention. Meanwhile, Adrian convinced himself that the divorce was proof he had finally chosen the right path. He moved forward with Victoria as if his old marriage was something embarrassing he had outgrown. Victoria enjoyed the attention. She enjoyed being seen beside an executive who appeared successful and ambitious. She attended meetings with Adrian. She joined him at industry events. She made it clear that she believed she belonged in his new life, and Adrian loved how people reacted to them. For the first time in months, he felt like he was becoming the person he wanted everyone to see. But there was one problem. Claire was still legally connected to the past he was trying to erase. Adrian's attorney contacted him about finalizing the remaining divorce details. Adrian expected routine paperwork. Instead, the conversation left him irritated. There are still some financial records that need clarification, his attorney explained. Adrian frowned. From Claire? Yes. Some assets and historical agreements need to be reviewed. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Claire doesn't have assets. He said it with complete confidence. That sentence revealed exactly how little he knew of the woman he had spent 10 years with. She barely cared about money, Adrian continued. She never invested. She never built anything. She just lived quietly. His attorney paused. That may be your understanding, but we still need to complete the review. Adrian disliked the uncertainty in his voice. He had spent months telling himself Claire was the reason he felt trapped. He had convinced himself that leaving her was the decision of a man finally choosing growth. The possibility that he did not understand her at all made him uncomfortable. But instead of questioning himself, Adrian became defensive. That evening, he told Victoria about the conversation. She immediately dismissed it. Lawyers make everything complicated, she said. Claire is probably trying to make sure she gets something out of the divorce. Adrian looked at her. A few months earlier, those words would have sounded reasonable. Now, something about them felt different. Not because he believed Claire was secretly powerful. He was not close to that realization yet, but because he remembered how little Claire had ever asked for. She never demanded expensive gifts. She never pressured him to buy luxury items. She never used their marriage to gain anything from him. Victoria noticed his silence. Adrian, don't start feeling guilty now. He looked away. I'm not. But he knew he was. Not because he missed the marriage. Because, for the first time, he wondered whether he had misunderstood the person he left behind. Across town, Claire received another update from Robert Harrison. There is something you should see, he told her during their meeting. He placed a folder on the table. Inside were documents showing several long-term business relationships connected to Whitmore Holdings. Claire carefully reviewed the information. Then she saw Adrian's company name. Cross Meridian Solutions had grown significantly over the last several years. Adrian often spoke about how his leadership and strategy had transformed the company. But the records showed another part of the story. Several major opportunities had come through partnerships connected to Whitmore interests, not directly through Claire. Not through anything Adrian knew about, but through a network built by her family. Claire read the documents twice. She was not angry because Adrian benefited from those opportunities. She was angry because of something deeper. He had spent years believing he had built everything alone, and worse, he had used that belief to justify looking down on her. He never knew, Robert said quietly. Claire closed the folder. No, she replied, and somehow that hurt more than she expected. Because Adrian had not only underestimated her wealth, he had underestimated her. Claire decided not to contact him. Not yet. She needed to know the full picture before making any decisions. Her goal was not to punish Adrian. Her goal was to make sure she never lost control of her own life again. That evening, Adrian attended a business dinner with Victoria. He spoke confidently about the future, about expanding his company, and about the opportunities waiting ahead. Everyone around him saw a successful executive. No one saw the uncertainty building underneath. After dinner, Adrian returned home and noticed an email waiting from his attorney. The subject line was simple. additional information regarding Whitmore-related agreements. He opened it expecting another routine update. Instead, he saw a name attached to a confidential corporate record, a name he had not expected to see connected to anything important: Claire Whitmore. And for the first time since the divorce began, Adrian felt something he had not felt in years: doubt. Claire Whitmore did not sleep much that night, not because she was overwhelmed by the inheritance, not because she was afraid of the responsibility waiting for her. She stayed awake because she kept thinking about how easily Adrian had erased 10 years of their marriage. The divorce papers were only paper. The real damage had happened long before. It happened every time Adrian dismissed her opinions because he believed she did not understand business. Every time he introduced her as someone who preferred a quiet life, while secretly feeling embarrassed that she was not chasing the same image he wanted. Claire had accepted many things during their marriage, but she had never accepted being treated as less than a person. That was why, the following morning, she walked into Whitmore Holdings with a clear purpose: not to prove anything to Adrian, not to impress anyone, to understand what she had inherited. The executive team had prepared a private meeting for her. Several senior leaders attended, including people who had worked with the Whitmore family for decades. They were respectful, but Claire noticed something else. They were cautious. They were watching her. They wanted to know whether she was simply someone who inherited power or someone capable of carrying it. Claire understood why. A company was not just numbers on a document. It was thousands of employees, long-term partnerships, and decisions that affected real lives. "I want everyone to be honest with me," Claire said during the meeting. "I do not need people telling me what sounds good. I need to know what is actually happening." That surprised them. Many wealthy heirs entered companies expecting control before understanding responsibility. Claire wanted the opposite. The first reports revealed several problems. Some divisions were performing well, but others had lost direction. Certain executives had become too comfortable. Some partnerships were being maintained because of history, rather than because they still made sense. Claire listened carefully. Then she noticed something familiar: Cross-Meridian Solutions. Adrian's company appeared in several reports connected to Whitmore-related business relationships. She did not react. She simply asked questions. How long has this partnership existed? Who approved the original agreement? Was this relationship reviewed after leadership changes? The executives answered, and slowly, Claire began understanding something that Adrian never knew. His success had never been as independent as he believed. For years, he had spoken as if every opportunity came from his own talent and ambition. But behind the scenes, some doors had opened because of connections linked to the Whitmore family. Not because Claire had asked anyone to help him, not because she had used her name. The support had existed long before Adrian ever knew, and that was what made his behavior hurt. He had benefited from a world he constantly claimed and he deserved more than she did. After the meeting, Robert Harrison walked with Claire back to her office. "You handled that well," he said. Claire looked through the glass walls of the building. "I'm not interested in proving I'm more powerful than Adrian." Robert nodded. "I know. I just don't want to become someone who uses money as a weapon. That is exactly why your family trusted you with this responsibility." Claire looked down at the folder in her hand. For the first time, she understood the difference between revenge and accountability. Revenge was about making someone hurt. Accountability was about making sure someone could no longer cause the same damage. Meanwhile, Adrian was becoming more confident by the day. He believed the divorce had removed the final obstacle between himself and the life he wanted. His company was preparing for a major partnership announcement. He saw it as proof that his choices had been correct. Victoria encouraged that belief. "You finally look like the person you were supposed to become," she told him during a dinner with several executives. Adrian smiled. Those words were exactly what he wanted to hear. He wanted to believe Claire represented the past. Victoria represented the future. But the future he imagined was built on information he did not have. A few days later, Adrian received an invitation to a private business review meeting involving one of the largest investment groups connected to his company. He immediately assumed it was a sign that his career was accelerating. He shared the news with Victoria. "This could change everything," he said. Victoria smiled. "I knew you were meant for bigger things." Adrian felt confident again. He did not know that the meeting had been scheduled because Whitmore Holdings was reviewing his company's position. He did not know the person responsible for the final decisions had already begun studying his business. And he certainly did not know that Claire had been sitting in those board discussions, reviewing contracts connected to his future. Claire, meanwhile, made one decision before the next stage began. She would not contact Adrian. She would not warn him. She would not give him the chance to rewrite the story before he understood what he had done. If he discovered the truth, he would discover it through reality, not through her anger. That evening, Robert sent Claire a message. A new document had been added to the company review. It contained information about a major upcoming business meeting involving Adrian's company. Claire opened the file. The first page showed the names of the companies involved. The second page showed the person scheduled to approve the final partnership decision. Claire stared at the signature line. Her own name was already there. Adrian Cross walked into the private conference room with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. The meeting was important. More important than any ordinary business discussion. Cross Meridian Solutions had been preparing for months to secure a major partnership that could expand the company's influence and increase its value significantly. Adrian saw it as proof that he had made the right choices. Leaving Claire had been difficult, but necessary. At least, that was the story he told himself. He adjusted his suit jacket before entering the room. Several executives were already waiting. Victoria Lane sat nearby, smiling proudly as she watched him greet everyone. This was the world Adrian wanted. Powerful people, important conversations, a future that looked impressive from the outside. What he did not know was that the most important person in the room had not arrived yet. Claire Whitmore entered a few minutes later. She was not trying to make an entrance. She was not dressed differently to attract attention. She simply walked in carrying a folder, accompanied by Robert Harrison. The reaction around the room changed immediately. Several executives stood. Not because Claire demanded it, because they knew exactly who she was, Adrian noticed. For a moment, confusion crossed his face. He looked at Robert, then at Claire. "Claire?" His voice carried surprise, but not recognition. "Not yet." Claire gave him a calm nod. "Adrian." He looked around the room. "What are you doing here?" The question was polite, but the meaning behind it was clear. He still believed Claire belonged outside this world. Robert stepped forward. "Ms. Whitmore is here representing Whitmore Holdings during today's review." Adrian stared at him. The words sounded familiar. But they did not make sense. Whitmore Holdings? Victoria looked between them. She seemed confused as well. Adrian gave a small laugh. "I think there has been some misunderstanding. Claire isn't involved in business operations." The room became quiet, not awkward, uncomfortable, because everyone else understood what Adrian did not. Claire remained calm. "I was not involved publicly," she said. That sentence stayed in the air. Adrian frowned. Publicly. He wanted to ask what she meant. But before he could, the meeting began. For the next hour, Adrian watched something he could not explain. Claire asked questions that revealed a deeper understanding of the company than he expected. She noticed details in contracts. She questioned assumptions in financial projections. She understood long-term strategy. Not like someone reading prepared notes. Like someone who had been studying these decisions for years. At first, Adrian assumed Robert had coached her. Then he realized something. Robert was listening to her, not guiding her. Listening, that bothered him. Because Adrian had spent years believing Claire had no interest in business, he remembered all the time she quietly sat beside him while he taught about work. He thought she was simply being supportive. Now he wondered if she had been understanding far more than he ever realized. During a discussion about Cross Meridian's partnership history, one executive mentioned the importance of maintaining trust with Whitmore-related companies. Claire looked toward Adrian. Not angrily, not triumphantly, just observing. Adrian felt uncomfortable under that silence. He had spent months believing Claire was the person who needed him. Now he was sitting across from her in a room where everyone else treated her as someone important. After the meeting ended, Adrian followed her into the hallway. "Claire," she stopped. "What is this?" Claire looked at him. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean." His voice lowered. "Since when are you connected to Whitmore Holdings?" Claire did not answer immediately, because she knew the question was not really about business. It was about his perception of her. For years, Adrian had built a version of a Claire in his mind. A quiet wife, a dependent partner, someone who needed his protection. Accepting the truth meant admitting he had never truly known her. "I have always been connected to my family," Claire finally said. Adrian shook his head. "No, that's not possible." The confidence in his voice disappeared. "You never said anything." Claire looked away briefly. "I never had a reason to." That answer hurt him more than he expected, because it forced him to confront something he did not want to admit. Claire had not hidden her identity because she wanted to trick him. She had hidden it because she wanted to know if he valued her without it, and he had failed that test. Before Adrian could continue, Robert approached Claire. "Miss Whitmore, the board members are ready for the next review." Adrian heard the title, Miss Whitmore. Not Claire, not his wife. A person with authority. He watched her walk away. For the first time since their divorce began, he felt the balance between them shifting. But he still did not understand how far it had shifted. Later that afternoon, Adrian returned to his office and immediately searched through public information about Whitmore Holdings. He found articles about the company's history. He found names of executives. He found references to family ownership, but nothing connected Claire, clearly. That uncertainty made him more anxious. If Claire was only an advisor, he could explain it. If she was more involved, he needed to know how much. Victoria noticed his concern when he arrived home. "What happened today?" she asked. Adrian hesitated. "Claire was at the meeting." Victoria laughed softly. "Why would Claire be at a major business meeting?" He looked at her. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." For this, Victoria did not immediately have an answer. The confidence between them weakened slightly. That night, Adrian received another confidential update from his attorney. The message contained a copy of a corporate filing connected to the Whitmore Legacy Trust. He opened the attachment. At first, he only skimmed the document. Then he saw the signature. His eyes stopped. The name at the bottom was clear. Claire Whitmore, and beside it was a title he never expected to see attached to the woman he had divorced. Controlling beneficiary. Adrian Cross stared at the document on his screen longer than he expected. The words were clear. Claire Whitmore was not simply connected to the Whitmore family. She was not just someone invited into a business discussion. She was listed as the controlling beneficiary of the Whitmore Legacy Trust. For several minutes, Adrian tried to find another explanation. Maybe there was another Claire Whitmore. Maybe the document was incomplete. Maybe Robert Harrison had exaggerated her involvement. But every time he searched for an answer, the same uncomfortable truth appeared. The woman he had divorced was connected to a level of power he never imagined. And the worst part was not that Claire had money. It was that she had never needed him to know. Adrian closed the document and leaned back in his chair. He thought about every conversation they had during their marriage. Every time he told her she lacked ambition. Every time he complained that she did not understand his world. Every time I acted as if he was the one carrying their life forward. A strange feeling settled over him. Not yet, something closer to embarrassment. Because he realized he had spent years judging someone he never truly understood. But instead of accepting that reality, Adrian did what he had always done. He looked for a way to regain control. The next morning, he called Claire. She answered after several rings. Adrian. Her voice was calm. That bothered him. He expected anger. He expected emotion. Instead, Claire sounded like someone speaking to a former business contact. "Claire, we need to talk." "About what?" He paused. He wanted to ask about the trust. He wanted to ask why she had hidden everything, but he knew how that would sound. So he chose a different approach. "I think things moved too quickly." Claire remained silent. Adrian continued. "The divorce. The way everything happened. Maybe we both made decisions while we were upset." Claire looked out of the window of her office as she listened. She knew exactly what was happening. Adrian was not calling because he suddenly understood her pain. He was calling because the image of her had changed. Before, she had been the wife he believed had nothing. Now she was someone with influence. The difference was not Claire. The difference was what Adrian believed she could give him. "I don't think we were confused, Adrian," she finally said. His expression tightened. "You don't mean that." "I do." The certainty in her voice surprised him. For years, Adrian had been used to Claire leaving the door open. Now she was closing it. "I made mistakes," he said. Claire looked down at the documents on her desk. "Yes, you did." The answer was simple. No argument, no anger. That made it harder to handle. "Claire, I know I hurt you. You hurt me because you stopped seeing me as your partner." Adrian became quiet. She continued. "You started seeing me as something that either helped your image or damaged it. That's not fair." "It is." Her voice remained steady. "You didn't leave because we were unhappy. You left because you believed I was no longer useful to the life you wanted." Adrian had no immediate response, because part of him knew she was right, but another part still resisted. He wanted to believe his choices were complicated. Not selfish, not cruel. After the call ended, Adrian sat alone for several minutes. Then Victoria entered his office. She immediately noticed something was wrong. What happened? Adrian looked at her. For the first time, he saw uncertainty behind her confidence. "I found out Claire has a connection to Whitmore Holdings." Victoria frowned. "How much of a connection?" Adrian hesitated. "I'm still trying to understand." That answer worried her, because Adrian was usually certain. He was the person who always had a plan. The person who claimed to know exactly where he was going. Now he was confused. Victoria stepped closer. "Adrian, whatever this is, don't let her manipulate you." The irony was impossible to ignore. The woman who had helped convince him Claire was holding him back was now afraid of what Claire represented. Meanwhile, Claire continued preparing for the next stage. She met with the Whitmore legal team again. The discussion was not about revenge. It was about responsibility. They reviewed company structures, partnerships, and potential conflicts of interest. One issue required careful attention. Adrian's company had benefited from several business relationships connected to Whitmore Holdings. Nothing illegal had been proven, but there were questions about whether Adrian had used his reputation and marriage to create opportunities while presenting himself as completely independent. Claire did not make immediate accusations. She requested a full review. Facts first, emotion later. That decision impressed the legal team. They had expected someone hurt by betrayal to act quickly. Instead, Claire protected herself by staying careful. She had learned something during her marriage. Love could make people ignore warning signs. Power could make people act without thinking. She refused to make either mistake again. 3 days later, Adrian received an invitation to a private board-level meeting. The meeting was supposed to discuss the future of several partnerships involving cross-meridian solutions. He assumed it was another opportunity to prove himself. He prepared his presentation. He reviewed his numbers. He planned how he would convince everyone that his company deserved continued support. He still believed he was walking into a negotiation. He did not know he was walking into a review, and he had no idea who would be sitting at the head of the table. That evening, Robert Harrison sent Claire one final message before the meeting. "The board is ready. They want you to make the opening statement." Claire read the message quietly. For years, Adrian had believed she was the person standing behind him. Tomorrow, he would discover the truth. She had never been behind him. She had been the person holding the door open. Adrian Cross arrived at the board meeting, prepared to defend his future. He had spent the entire night reviewing presentations, financial reports, and partnership projections. He knew what he wanted everyone to see: a successful executive. A man who had built his company through determination. A leader who deserved bigger opportunities. That was the image Adrian had spent years creating. But when he entered the room, he immediately realized something was different. The atmosphere was not what he expected. The executives were polite, but distant. There was no excitement about the partnership announcement, no casual conversation about future growth. Instead, everyone seemed focused on one thing: the person sitting at the end of the table. Claire Whitmore. Adrian stopped for a moment. She looked completely comfortable. Not because she was trying to prove she belonged, because she knew she did. For years, Adrian had seen Claire as someone standing beside important people. Now he was watching everyone wait for her decision. Robert Harrison opened the meeting. Thank you all for joining us. Today's discussion concerns the future relationship between Whitmore Holdings and Cross Meridian Solutions. Adrian sat down. He expected Robert to introduce him. Instead, Robert turned toward Claire. Ms. Whitmore, would you like to begin? The words landed harder than Adrian expected. Ms. Whitmore, not Claire, not Adrian's wife, not the quiet woman he believed had no place in his professional world. Claire opened the folder in front of her. I've reviewed the partnership history and the performance records, she said calmly. Before any decisions are made, I want to understand how this relationship has been managed. Adrian listened carefully. Her tone was not aggressive. She was not trying to embarrass him. That almost made it worse. If Claire had attacked him, he could have defended himself. But she was simply doing her job, a job he never imagined she could have. During the discussion, Claire pointed out several issues in Cross Meridian's recent strategy. She asked about long-term planning, client retention, and operational risks. Questions that showed experience. Questions that showed preparation. Adrian felt the confidence he brought into the room slowly disappearing. He looked around. Nobody seemed surprised by Claire's knowledge. That realization unsettled him. They knew something he did not. After the meeting ended, several executives approached Claire. They asked for her thoughts. They thanked her for her time. Adrian watched from a distance. 6 weeks earlier, he had believed Claire was leaving with nothing. Now people with decades of experience were waiting for her approval. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Outside the conference room, Adrian finally caught up with her. Claire. She stopped. He lowered his voice. You knew about this? Claire looked at him. About what? About all of this. She understood what he meant. The company, the trust, the influence, the power. I knew my family had responsibilities, she said. Adrian shook his head. That's not an answer. Claire studied his expression. For the first time, she saw something different in him. Not arrogance, fear. But even then, she did not feel satisfaction. She only felt tired. Because she knew Adrian was not struggling with losing her. He was struggling with realizing he had misunderstood her. You never asked, Claire said quietly. The sentence stopped him. Because it was true. He had spent years assuming he knew everything about her. He had never actually tried to understand her. Adrian wanted to argue. He wanted to say he would have acted differently if he had known. But that thought bothered him, because it revealed something about himself. Would he have loved Claire more if she had been wealthy? Would he have treated her better if she had carried a powerful last name? The answer made him uncomfortable. That evening, Adrian returned home later than usual. Victoria immediately noticed his mood. What happened? He placed his briefcase down. The meeting was different than I expected. She watched him carefully. Because of Claire? He did not answer. That was enough. Victoria's expression changed. She is trying to make you feel small. Adrian looked at her. No, the word came out before he could stop it. Victoria went quiet because Adrian had defended Claire, even slightly, and that was something he had not done in months. I just think there are things I didn't know, he admitted. Victoria crossed her arms. Like what? Adrian looked away. He did not have an answer, because the truth was becoming harder to ignore. He had left Claire because he thought she had no ambition, but maybe she simply had no interest in proving herself to people who did not deserve access to her life. Meanwhile, Claire continued working with the Whitmore team. She reviewed the situation carefully. She did not want Adrian's company destroyed. She wanted the business decisions to be fair. But she also knew something had to change. The same confidence that made Adrian successful had become dangerous when combined with his belief that he was always right. Robert brought her updated information regarding Cross Meridian. There is something else you should know, he said. Claire looked up. What is it? Your former husband's company is more dependent on Whitmore-related relationships than he realizes. Claire looked at the report, several contracts, several partnerships, several opportunities. All connected. She closed the folder. Then we need a complete review. Robert nodded. That may affect Adrian's position. Claire remained silent. She understood the consequences. But she also understood something else. Protecting someone from the consequences of their own choices was not the same as helping them. The next morning, Adrian received a message from his company's legal department. The subject line was urgent, partnership status review. He opened the email expecting routine information. Instead, he saw a notice that made his entire body go still. The upcoming deal was no longer moving forward as planned. A final approval was required. And the person with authority to make that decision was the same woman he had once called a burden. Claire Whitmore. Adrian Cross had spent years believing he understood success. He believed it came from confidence, from connections, from knowing how to present yourself in the right rooms. But now, sitting alone in his office, he was forced to face something he had never considered. The person he dismissed as ordinary had been quietly holding influence over the very world he wanted to enter. The partnership review had changed everything. Cross Meridian Solutions was not collapsing. Not yet. But the confidence Adrian had built his identity around was gone. The final approval for the deal depended on Claire, and for the first time in his career, Adrian was not the person making the decision. He was the person waiting. That feeling was unfamiliar, and he hated it. He called Claire again. This time, he did not sound angry. He sounded careful. "Claire, I think we need to talk in person." She looked at the phone for a moment before answering. Part of her wondered if this was the same man who had placed divorce papers in front of her without hesitation. The same man who believed he was removing a problem from his life. About what, Adrian? About us. Claire closed her eyes briefly. She already knew what this was. A conversation that should have happened months ago, not because he had discovered her position, because he had finally discovered her value. "I don't think there is anything left to discuss." "That's not fair." Claire stayed quiet. Adrian took a breath. "I made mistakes. Yes." The simple agreement caught him off guard. "I know I hurt you. You hurt me because you stopped seeing me as a person." Adrian looked down. He wanted to deny it, but every memory came back. The comments about her being too comfortable, the way he compared her to other executives' spouses, the way Victoria's presence slowly became normal while Claire was treated like an inconvenience. "I was under pressure," he said. Claire's expression hardened slightly. Pressure does not make someone disrespect another person. It reveals what they already believe. The words stayed with him, because deep down he knew she was right. He had not become someone cruel overnight. He had simply allowed himself to believe that success gave him permission to judge others. "I want to fix this," Adrian finally said. Claire looked toward the city outside her office. "Do you want to fix it because you miss me?" He hesitated. That hesitation answered the question. Or at least, it answered it for her. Claire did not feel anger. She felt disappointment, because after everything, Adrian still did not understand the damage he caused. He was trying to repair the consequences, not the choices. "I need time," she said. "That means you're considering it." "No, Adrian." Her voice remained calm. "It means I need time to decide what kind of relationship, if any, is possible after what happened." The distinction was important. Claire was no longer waiting for someone else to choose her. She was choosing herself. Meanwhile, Victoria began noticing changes in Adrian. The man she had admired for his confidence was becoming uncertain. He spent more time checking emails, more time asking questions, more time thinking about Claire. One evening, Victoria finally confronted him. "You still care about her?" Adrian looked surprised. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" He had no answer, because he knew the truth was complicated. He did not simply miss Claire. He missed the stability she brought, the patience, the loyalty, the person who supported him before anyone else cared about his achievements. Victoria saw his silence, and for the first time, she questioned whether she had chosen the right person. The image she loved was beginning to disappear. At the same time, Claire continued working with her legal team. The review of Cross Meridian's business history was complete. There were no immediate signs of criminal behavior, but there were decisions that raised serious concerns. Adrian had benefited from relationships connected to the Whitmore network, while believing he had built everything alone. Claire did not use that information to destroy him. She simply made sure the company would no longer depend on hidden advantages he never understood. That decision was difficult. A part of her wanted Adrian to feel the same humiliation she had felt, but she knew that would only keep her connected to him. She did not want revenge. She wanted freedom. Robert Harrison delivered the final review documents to her. "There is one more matter," he said. Claire looked up. "What is it?" "The divorce agreement." She frowned slightly. "What about it?" "There are financial disclosures that may need another review." Some information was incomplete when the agreement was prepared. Claire opened the file. The documents showed details about Adrian's financial decisions during the separation: accounts, transfers, business interests. Nothing dramatic at first glance. But one detail stood out. Adrian had moved forward with the divorce while already making plans that involved Victoria and future business arrangements. Claire studied the information carefully. She was not surprised. But seeing it documented made something inside her finally settle. For months, she had questioned whether she was overreacting, whether she had been too quiet, whether she should have fought harder for a marriage Adrian had already abandoned. Now she knew. She had not lost a partnership. She had escaped a situation where she was only valued when she was useful. That evening, Adrian received a call from his attorney. The tone was different this time, serious. "Adrian, we need to discuss some documents connected to your divorce." Adrian immediately felt tension rise. "What documents?" "There are issues regarding financial disclosures and possible consequences that need to be reviewed." He stood up. "What does that mean?" His attorney paused. "It means you may have underestimated what Claire knew before the divorce was finalized." Adrian looked toward the window. For the first time, he understood something terrifying. Claire had not been powerless. She had simply been silent. And now the silence was ending. The weeks after the board's decision changed everything for Adrian Cross. Not because Claire destroyed him. She did not. That was the part he struggled to understand. He had expected anger. He had expected revenge. He had expected Claire to use her power the way he would have used it if their positions were reversed. Instead, she acted with restraint. The partnership review continued professionally. Cross Meridian Solutions lost several advantages it had relied on, but the company was given the opportunity to correct its problems. Claire refused to turn business decisions into personal punishment. That made Adrian feel something he had not expected: respect. It came too late, but it was there. For the first time, he saw the difference between power and cruelty. Claire had more authority than he could have imagined, but she did not need to prove it by hurting him. She simply made decisions based on what was right. Adrian's reputation, however, did not recover as easily. People who once admired his confidence began asking different questions. How much of his success had been his own? How much had come from relationships he never fully understood? The answers were uncomfortable, not because Adrian had done nothing. He had worked hard, he had talent, but he had also built a story about himself where he was the only reason he succeeded. And that story had collapsed. Victoria noticed the change before anyone else. The expensive dinners became less frequent. The confident conversations about their future became quieter. The man she had admired for his ambition was no longer walking into rooms like he owned them. One evening, she finally confronted him. "You're not the same person anymore." Adrian looked at her. "What does that mean?" Victoria hesitated, because the truth sounded worse when spoken aloud. "I thought you were moving toward something bigger." Adrian understood. She had not fallen in love with him. She had fallen in love with the version of him she believed was coming, and now that version was disappearing. "You wanted the successful executive," Adrian said, quietly. Victoria did not answer. She did not have to. A few days later, she moved out. There was no dramatic argument, no public scene, just a quiet ending to a relationship that had been built on ambition and appearance. Adrian watched her leave and realized something painful. The woman he left Claire for had never actually known him either. Meanwhile, Claire continued building the future she wanted. At Whitmore Holdings, she focused on long-term changes. She reviewed leadership structures. She improved internal accountability. She pushed for decisions that protected employees and strengthened the company's foundation. The executives who had once wondered whether she could handle responsibility began seeing why her family trusted her. Claire was not powerful because she inherited wealth. She was powerful because she understood that wealth came with obligations. One afternoon, Robert Harrison visited her office. "You know," he said, placing a folder on her desk, "many people in your position would have used this opportunity differently." Claire looked at the folder but did not open it. "I thought about it." Robert smiled slightly. "I assumed you did." Claire looked out at the city. "There was a time when I wanted Adrian to feel exactly what I felt." She paused. "But then I realized I didn't want my future controlled by what he did to me. That was the difference. For months, Adrian had been the center of her pain. Now he was simply part of her past. She had spent years trying to prove that she was enough. Enough as a wife, enough as a partner, enough without a famous name or visible wealth. Now she understood something she wished she had learned earlier. She had never needed to prove her value. She only needed to stop giving people permission to define it. Adrian, meanwhile, started rebuilding his life differently. Not quickly, not easily, but honestly. He began taking responsibility for decisions he once blamed on circumstances. He stopped telling people that Claire had changed, because he finally understood the truth. Claire had not changed. She had simply stopped accepting the version of herself he created. Months later, Adrian requested one final meeting. Claire agreed. Not because she wanted to return, because she wanted closure. They met in a quiet restaurant away from business circles and familiar faces. Adrian looked different, less confident, but more honest. "I was wrong about you," he said. Claire listened. "I thought because you didn't show ambition the way I did, you didn't have any." He looked down. "I thought because you didn't chase status, you didn't understand success." Claire remained silent. "I hurt the person who believed in me before anyone else did." The apology was real, and Claire could recognize that. But forgiveness did not mean returning to the past. "I hope you become someone you respect," she said. Adrian looked at her. "And us?" Claire took a breath. "That part of my life is finished." It hurt him, but for once he accepted it, because he finally understood what he had lost. Not money, not access, not influence. A person who loved him before he became obsessed with being admired. After the meeting, Claire returned to Whitmore Holdings. She walked through the same doors where people once wondered if she belonged. Now they knew. But more importantly, she knew. That night, Robert sent her an urgent message. A new opportunity had appeared. A major expansion project involving international partners wanted Whitmore Holdings' approval. Claire opened the file. The first page contained the project details. The second page contained the names of the people requesting her involvement, and at the bottom was a note that made her pause. Someone from Adrian's former business circle wanted to speak with her privately. They claimed they had information about decisions Adrian made before the divorce. Information that could change how everyone viewed the story. Claire stared at the message for several seconds. Then she closed the file, because she knew the next chapter of her life would not be about what Adrian had taken from her. It would be about what she chose to build. Months after the divorce was finalized, Claire Whitmore stood inside the main conference room of Whitmore Holdings and looked at the city below her. Years earlier, she had sat quietly beside Adrian at corporate events, watching him introduce himself as the person building their future. People assumed she was only there because she was his wife. They never asked what she had built. They never asked what she understood. They never asked why powerful people always treated her with quiet respect. Now they knew. The woman they had dismissed as ordinary was the person who held the final authority over the empire behind the name Whitmore. But Claire had learned something important. The greatest change in her life was not becoming wealthy. She had already been valuable before anyone knew about her inheritance. The money only revealed what had always been there: her patience, her intelligence, her ability to lead, her strength when the person she trusted most chose to hurt her. The official transition at Whitmore Holdings was completed without the dramatic battles many expected. Claire did not remove people simply to show control. She made careful decisions based on performance, honesty, and responsibility. That included Adrian. His career changed, but he was not destroyed. The consequences came from his own choices, the deals he handled without transparency, the relationships he used without understanding, the reputation he damaged when he believed status mattered more than character. Adrian eventually accepted that Claire had never been his obstacle. She had been the person standing beside him before anyone cared about his title. He had mistaken quietness for weakness. He had mistaken simplicity for lack of ambition, and he had mistaken her love for dependence. 1 year after their final conversation, Adrian sent Claire a short message. There was no request, no attempt to reopen the marriage, only an apology. He wrote that he finally understood the difference between losing a wealthy wife and losing someone who truly believed in him. Claire read the message. Then she closed her phone. She did not feel anger anymore. That was the freedom she had been looking for. Forgiving someone did not mean giving them access to her life again. It only meant she no longer carried the weight of what they had done. Claire continued leading Whitmore Holdings with the same values she had always carried. She invested in responsible growth and surrounded herself with people who respected her decisions, not just her name. For years, she had wondered if revealing her hidden identity would have changed Adrian's behavior. Maybe he would have treated her differently. Maybe he would have valued her more. But she eventually understood that was the wrong question. The real question was why someone needed proof of her worth before offering respect. The hidden identity everyone focused on was never the biggest secret. Her fortune was not the most important thing Adrian failed to see. It was Claire herself, the woman who stayed calm when she was underestimated. The woman who walked away when she was no longer respected. The woman who chose peace when revenge would have been easier. At a charity event celebrating new investments from Whitmore Holdings, Claire stood among executives, partners, and leaders who now knew exactly who she was. A guest approached her and said, "You must be proud that everyone finally recognizes you." Claire smiled. "I think I'm more proud that I finally recognize myself." That answer stayed with her, because for a long time she had waited for someone else to see her. Her husband, his friends, the people who judged her by appearances. But she no longer needed that approval. Claire had lost a marriage. She had lost the future she once imagined. But she had found something more important. A life where she did not have to shrink herself to make someone else comfortable. And somewhere far away from the world that once underestimated her, Adrian was learning the same lesson from the opposite side. Some people leave because they never truly understand what they have. By the time they finally see the truth, the opportunity to appreciate it is already gone. Claire Whitmore had inherited a billion-dollar empire. But her greatest victory was never the wealth. It was becoming the person she always had been. If this story made you think about the people around you, take a moment to ask yourself, would you recognize someone's true value before losing them? Share your thoughts in the comments, and join us for more unforgettable stories of hidden identities, emotional twists, and second chances.